Welcome back to County Connection. For our next segment, we're going to be talking about some wildfire mitigation projects that have been taking place this summer. And here to tell us all about it is Dan Schroder from Summit County CSU Extension. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much.
So Dan, we've had a wide variety of activity out there in the summer of 2019 working on protecting our community from wildfire. And one of the programs through which this is happening is our Wildfire Mitigation Grant Program. So can you start by giving us an overview of what that program's all about?
That's great. Thanks for letting me have that opportunity. So we start with a 50-50 cost share. So we do a fuel reduction program where communities can come together and apply for a grant, and then once all the work is done, the county reimburses the overall cost of the program half. Another version that we have is what we call our Community Wildfire Protection Plan Implementation Grants Program, and that is everything you can imagine that's wildfire prevention and community protection that's not fuel reduction, that's not cutting down trees. So people are like, what do you mean not cutting down trees? Isn't that what wildfire prevention is? And well, actually, if you did or didn't know, there are a number of communities in Summit County that do not have a fire hydrant system. So they don't have pressurized wildfire fighting water. So we have funded a number of cistern installations around the county. Another one, just as an example, is providing signage in communities that have mixed-matched or non-existent signage so our fire crews can find them.
Great. And so these grants are available to HOAs or groups of neighbors, so multiple property owners who kind of get together, identify a need, and come to the county with an idea for how they can better protect their neighborhood from wildfire.
Great summary. I mean, you grabbed it completely. And the reason that's important is science shows that one home that does defensible space or tries to protect itself really doesn't survive a wildfire if a whole community is being, a front is approaching. We really need a contiguous, throughout neighborhoods, home by home by home, fuel break or fuel reduction across all properties. Because fire doesn't know the boundary between your private and my private, but if we work together as a whole community, the potential for loss due to fire is diminished.
Great. So what are some examples of the projects that have been taking place this summer through these grant programs?
That sounds great for inviting me once again. So I'd love to start in the lower blue. The Ruby Ranch subdivision has been really active across the years seeking grants and cost share assistance from the county. And this year they got grant support to do fuel reduction, to basically do a 5-acre clear cut in the southwest corner of Ruby Ranch. So what this really is a chunk of land adjacent to the wilderness area.
Okay.
It's very challenging to do any sort of fuel reduction or modification of the land in the wilderness.
Sure.
But we can do work on the private property that's immediately adjacent. And the idea is that would protect Ruby Ranch, and very specifically, immediately 7 to 15 homes. And then thereafter is the town of Silverthorne if a wildfire were coming from the hillside, sort of Frisco towards Silverthorne, under Buffalo. So we funded that program this year. One of the CWPP programs we funded is in Blue River. So Blue River has had for a number of years, maybe the last 5 years, been actively working on putting a cistern array, so a number of tanks underground that would be filled with water for firefighting purpose. And they had 3 left to complete the entire system, the whole program, and the county funded that this year as well. So those are a couple of fuel reduction and then everything else, a wildfire prevention program.
Excellent. So in addition to the grant program, which works with private property owners, we also have been this summer for the first time working in a really robust way with partners such as the U.S. Forest Service on some new programs. So tell us about that.
So this is really great. It's been posed to me, it was a firefighter that shared that we have a number of COGs working in Summit County right now. And the most important COG is really all of the residents. And that might be through the chipping program. Many people have heard about curbside slash removal.
Right.
That's a little COG because it's it's a lot of action, but it's a little amount of material that we're removing from communities. Then we have this medium cog that's Summit County Open Space and Trails, towns, the municipalities doing work, and that's on a larger landscape scale. And then we have our greatest partners of all, Denver Water, the United States Forest Service, Dillon Ranger District, a number of the bigger players, and they manage enormous swaths of land.
Right.
So yes, this 2018 ballot measure that was passed that puts some money into these programs has allowed us to work very closely with the Forest Service. They have a number of projects already ready to go. The trouble is funding. Our government, United States government, doesn't have a whole lot of extra funds laying around. And so we all get to support fuel reduction and forest resilient projects in our own backyard. And so that's really great. I have a couple that I could share.
Yeah, it is amazing how proactive our community has been in identifying this challenge and putting funds toward it through the ballot box and working with our partners to be able to implement these strategies. So one of the strategies is we have a, let's see, what's it called? A hazardous fuels mitigation staff.
That's right.
So tell us about that one.
Well, that'd be really great. A fuels crew. They basically are tough guys and gals that don't mind getting dirty, and what they're doing is fuel reduction work with chainsaws. And so the very specific project that hit the ground this year is the Middle Barton Creek Trail. So if you're on Airport Road and you go towards Peak 7, that would be American is to the south and Barton Road slightly to the west and north, then you hit the trailhead. And we've had a chainsaw crew in there for the last few weeks doing this enormous salvage logging project with county taxpayer funds. That's how they got here. And salvage means all dead trees. So the living trees remain, all the dead trees have been dropped, and if people choose to go hiking on that trail, they'll see a number of pyramids that have been built. Right, I guess that's exactly what it is, and they're gonna be burned in the next 2 years probably. But there's a lot of good firewood there, and I talked to the district ranger recently, and I asked about that material, and he said people can buy a permit to collect wood. It's $20 at the Dillon Ranger District, and you're welcome to go up there and get these rounds that are in pretty long sections, 2 cords of wood for $20, and you can have an enormous amount of firewood, take a local resource and put it to beneficial use.
Excellent.
So that's one project.
Okay, and then how about our fire watch crews? That's another crew, but doing some different work, right?
Yes, this is really great. In the last few years, they've come up with these enormous statistics talking about how many fire pits they've broken down in the wilderness and how many people they've talked to that are out there hiking or backpacking. And so the 1A funds have funded a summer seasonal crew we're calling it a recreation crew. The other was the fuels crew. And they're out there interfacing with the public, doing trail work, hazard tree mitigation at times when it feels like it would be needed to protect trails, but mostly helping to educate. And then we have a number of campgrounds that are in the backcountry, but we really like people to stay in sort of a centralized zone rather than being really dispersed. And they're out there helping inform the public so that the public knows what to do.
Right, because the Board of County Commissioners recently implemented fire restrictions, and so one of the things that crew does in terms of education is letting people know that those fire restrictions are in place and what kinds of activities are not allowed.
Right, and right now, if you're backpacking and you're on the forest, you can use a stove, and that's it.
Right, no fires.
No fires.
All right, let's see, what else? Are there other projects that we should highlight here?
I would love to highlight one more, and just to say to the audience, there were 16 different projects that were funded this year. I'm just highlighting a couple, but we're doing a lot of work across Summit County. So one that's really cool is cross-boundary, cross-ownership partnership. I mentioned that a little bit before with the different cogs, but this one is under the Breckenridge gondola. So if you end up riding the gondola, the section right below it, just as it starts flying up, is
the one from that starts in the parking lot.
That's right.
Okay.
That area is called the Woods. And if you know your trails, just above the Woods HOA subdivision is the Pence Miller Trail. That would be just below Ski Hill Road. So anyhow, the town of Breckenridge Open Space and Trails applied for a grant, and they were awarded one, and they're going to do 100 acres or so along that entire hillside. And then directly below is the Woods HOA subdivision. They applied independently as a homeowner group to do work directly around their buildings. And the idea is those two projects are married. They end up becoming this contiguous system that we look for. And we're really tying into a number of other projects that have occurred in the past. Christie Heights is slightly above that. We have the Shock Hill neighborhood slightly to the north. And so with this Woods project, we're now going to have a contiguousness throughout the foot or the ankle area of Peak 8.
Great, and that gets at that continuity principle you were talking about before in the grant program.
And it's across landscape scale. Many of us kind of forget, we have our blinders and we think about just our travel around the county or our own property, and this is across an entire zone. So that's a real highlight program that's being funded with this Strong Future Fund pot of funds.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of really great work happening on the ground this summer through the initiative of private property owners, through our voters, through our partners, through our staff at the county. So it's all really encouraging when we think about this threat of wildfire, which is really our main natural disaster hazard here in this community.
Right, so I would just like to take the opportunity to thank the voters for thinking about where we live, this beautiful natural environment that we've all moved to, or some of us were born here, and taking care of it. We're looking to protect it. So at the ballot box last fall, voters approved a measure that supports a number of different social programs here in Summit County. One of the 5 is wildfire prevention, and we are able to do some really robust work. And the tagline here at the county is, it takes everyone to protect everyone. And we thank you for helping us to do that.
Great. Well, thanks very much for joining us on SCTV today, Dan. And thanks to those of you at home who've joined us for another episode of County Connection. We'll look forward to seeing you next month.